Hello, and welcome to another episode of Social Workers Rise. This episode is brought to you by CHEP, the host of the 11th Annual Addictions Conference, Inclusive Recovery Addressing Diversity and Co-Occurring Disorders. And they are one of our sponsors. We're here with Jennifer Travers, MSW, who is a employee of CHEP, and she actually oversees the direction of operations. And I love that you're here, Jennifer, because you have such a wealth of experience. And when I saw you type up, like, are you sure I'm an okay guest? I said, oh my God, you're perfect. Yes, this is amazing. Thank you. So just to tell you a little bit about my colleague, Jennifer here, she's an MSW and has been in the field for 16 years. She's done several different jobs, from case management to program management to running court-ordered education groups. And now she is the head honcho, one of the head honchos, the director of operations for CHEP. Welcome to the podcast, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you too. I have to know, okay, so you've done so many different jobs, and one of the concerns of social workers is, okay, I have this job right out of grad school or right out of my BSW, and I don't really like it.
Yeah.
And they get scared, like maybe social work isn't for them. And I try to tell them, no, believe me, there are plenty of jobs out there. You don't have to stay stuck in a toxic work environment. And Jennifer, I believe that you are a perfect example of how diverse your career can be. So would you be able to just tell us a little bit about kind of what you've done and how you got to be where you are now?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, anyone thinking about coming into the field or being in the field, I started as a case manager, like an entry level case manager, just trying to get information. It would be like psychosocial type of work where you're just literally gathering the information to pass it off to someone else. And then I just continued to kind of do that. And I expanded into then becoming my own a case of like a level two case manager, which is like you did a little bit more, you did the treatment plans. Then I started program managing. And then I started to manage other programs and case managers and really just worked my way up over the years. And really during that time, I was growing and learning and really just honing in on some skills like what did I like about case management and program management, and then maybe some of the things that were not me. Like I did not want to initially do policies and procedures. It was very overwhelming to me. Strategic planning was really overwhelming to me. And so I just kind of looked at what I liked and what I didn't like and tried to find ways to utilize what I liked.
Definitely. And I love that it sounds like you learned something about yourself and about the field from every position that you've had to kind of narrow it down. What do I want to do next?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Also, I do want to mention, listener, in case you missed it, Jennifer is an MSW. So, and we were talking a little bit about this offline, that, Jennifer, you were saying that you haven't gotten your clinical license because there hasn't really been much of a need for it in your experience.
Yes. So for anyone who is like in school or just coming out as with your MSW, for me personally, the test was something that I'm sure like many of anyone who's young to the field or new to the field, it's overwhelming. And I just have this anxiety about, well, like, what if I fail the test? Am I going to feel like I failed, my profession, or that I'm not the best version of my profession? And what I found is that when I got into case management, program management, and even running the programs and managing other people, I loved doing it and I was able to do the work and I didn't need my LCSW or my LCSWC. And then I did go and do the clinical hours and I did plan to take the test. And it was more as a personal goal because, from a professional standpoint, as I continue to grow within the field, and then now that I am the director of operations for CHEP, I learned that I don't need it. I'm able to do macro level social work as a director of operations for this organization, and I don't have to have that credentials behind my name. And I'm still able to manage programs in 3 different states. and I'm able to have staff that report to me and work well with me without that. And so I think if there was anything that I would share with someone who's like new to the field or thinking about coming into the field, just the levels of like, we learn in school that there's so many things that social workers can do. But I think sometimes when we talk about some of the things that we can do, it sounds a lot like policies and procedures is where that level of where you don't need your research is where you don't need, a clinical standpoint. But really, there's a lot of day-to-day case management and program management and just change that you can do within the field without that clinical piece.
Yes, yes, fully agree. And I love that we are able to talk about this. I want to talk about what you do. So, what does your program do?
So we have currently two programs, one in South Carolina in Charleston and one in Maryland, where we are transitional housing programs. So we are partners with the VA Medical Center and we run what's called a grant and per diem program, which means we are grant funded and we have specific grant guidelines that we have to follow. So we are basically taking folks that are coming from active duty, incarceration, medical or mental health or addictions recovery, and they're coming into our place and they're staying in our homes, which are transitional for up to 2 years, that allow them then to, when they leave our program, hopefully get their permanent housing. And during that time, we literally do everything from A to Z to try to help wherever they are and get them back onto their feet and let them, be able to utilize the skills that they've learned to kind of get back on their feet and get permanently housed and be productive in whatever they're trying to do.
Okay, so essentially, we're talking about people who are currently experiencing homelessness. They
Correct.
are able to go into this transitional housing for 2 years, learn the skills that they need to then be independent and work on their own. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Which is so powerful. I love the concept of transitional housing. I have also worked in some transitional housing settings, and they are powerful, such a need in the community. I'm wondering if there's someone who hasn't worked with this type of population before, what would you say are maybe the top three things that they should know about this population before, considering going into work with in this type of field?
I would think anytime you work in a field where you have people that are coming in, with mental health, addiction, just they need a hand up. They need a moment for someone to really value them. One of the biggest things I would say is like meeting the client where they are. I know in the field, we have so many things that we have to do, especially when you're working for an agency or you're working for a hospital. We have things that we have to do, right? We have a list, we have a checkbox, we have things that we have to do. But I think taking the time, one of the things is meeting the client where they are, but also listening to the client. When they're coming in and saying, I'm overwhelmed, I've been transferred all these different places. I've went to 7 different stops today to try to get this paperwork filled out and I can't get my entry level paperwork filled out. Sometimes just stopping, taking a moment to breathe with them and saying, like, and validating them, validating their feelings and really meeting them where they are, I think are just some key components of no matter where you work. I think that makes you, 10 steps ahead of the next person.
Yes, yes. So meeting the client where they're at, listening to them and validating, those are all really, really strong skills that we need to have as social workers. And it goes a long way in establishing that therapeutic alliance with the client, essentially letting the client know, hey, I can be trusted. I care about your well being, and I may not have all the answers, but we're going to figure this out together so you don't have to feel
Yes.
alone.
Absolutely. And I think even just knowing, when you tell a client, like, hey, I don't know that today, but I will get it back to you. I will follow up with you. I think really strengthens those boundaries, the professional boundaries, but also just strengthens your skills. And then they feel comfortable knowing that you didn't just give them an answer because they were waiting on one.
Yes. And that is a fear that I hear from a lot of social workers is what if I don't know what to do? And
Yeah.
I tell them there you better get used to that because there will
Yeah.
be times that you don't know what to do. Even myself, I've been working in the field since 2009. There's still situations that I'm like, wow, I have no idea what to do.
Absolutely. And I think as like, the world changes and things change and the what like homelessness looks like, addiction looks like. All of it is so changing so quickly, just like everything else in the world. I think even someone like myself, I've been in the field 16 years, but there are still some things that will come across the desk that I'm like, wow, like we haven't had to deal with this before, or I didn't think about this type of thing before. Even just going through different things with, like, how do you isolate people when they may have any type of illness, but we are in a dormitory style living. We have been really fortunate in Maryland into that our transitional housings are set up like single family homes. But a lot of us that are new to the field, their dormitory style is set up like almost like a dorm, where they have a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people in one space, and just trying to figure out how we can still serve those that need to be served but stay safe is was hard. And it's going to take some time, and hopefully those that are continuing to come into the field will have even more knowledge about, like, just utilizing space differently and just really doing things differently, and that's what we need.
Definitely. Definitely. We're going to hit pause on this conversation real quick because the next time that you need continuing education units, I highly recommend the Therapist Development Center. TDC has helped more than 100,000 social workers pass their licensing exams, including myself. I love that TDC CE courses are engaging and relevant. Amanda and her experts give us clear and practical skills that we can immediately apply to our work. Some of my favorites are their Edge of Life Suicide Prevention course, where Amanda shares her personal experiences, and their They Did What? Law and Ethics course that looks at real cases where therapists faced formal disciplinary actions. We are legally required to take continuing education to increase our competence, and most other courses out there don't actually teach the material in a way that we can learn it, but TDC does. Check out the links in the show notes. So I'm wondering if somebody is interested in getting into this field, maybe making transition or coming into this field after grad school, are there anything that they can do to prepare, like any trainings that you recommend or any kind of entry level job opportunities, internships they could request, or even volunteer opportunities in their local community?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, and some of these people are going to be like, what? But I will say a couple of things that really helped me. Like, I think the amount of times that we utilize like the health department services or social services, a lot of times I think people think like, oh, I don't want that job because it's just an entry level job. But you learn so much about what is required, what the application process looks like, the time frames, the trials and tribulations that people go through. I think you learn so much from being a part of that process, because if you're working with someone in the homeless population or in recovery population, or co-occurring disorders like mental health and addiction, or medical and mental health, they're all going to need those type of services. So going and starting at a job where you're doing such an entry level thing, I think is huge, because you'll learn what it takes and what they need and the documents they need in the processing time. The other thing that I think is just instrumental, and I know in different counties they do this, but I don't know across like nationwide if they do this. But if you ever have an opportunity to do a re-entry simulation, it is, a lot of counties are doing it to try to help the community that's helping those that are coming from incarceration re-entry into like civilian life or just day-to-day life. But they have stations set up, and you can actually, they kind of take everything from you, which I know sounds very scary, but they take everything from you, and then you have to learn how to get a bus pass, to social services, a birth certificate, an ID, and it's a 1 day simulation. That I think is living in the lives of those that we're going to serve. And I think once you've learned, hey, I was so frustrated because it took me 3 hours to get the bus to get my ID, but then I forgot a form and I couldn't get my ID. I think it makes us better when we are those trying to serve those that are in need. And that's a volunteer thing. So if your county has it, it's usually ran by the health department, sometimes the local police stations. Those are two things that I think are just instrumental to anyone trying to get into the field. Living in the lives of those that we serve, I think, is huge, because one, it teaches us empathy, but it also teaches us what does it even look like, because sometimes we forget what type of luxury we have when we are just able to come to work. and not have a hardship or 10 hardships before we get here.
Yes, yes, I love that. And that the reentry simulation sounds like a great way to build empathy and understanding for your clients. And oh, I cannot even imagine trying to do all of those things. I mean, without a cell phone,
Right.
without a car or vehicle. I mean, oh gosh, this
I
sounds
know.
overwhelming to me.
It was, and even though we were just volunteering, like at the end of the day, we got to leave with our cell phone or we got to leave in our car, for those hours where you were like, well, you don't have a bus pass because you don't have money to get a bus pass, and then you need that bus pass to go get your birth certificate. It just makes you really realize, like, wow, like no wonder by the time they come to me to fill out the paperwork to get food stamps, they're so frustrated and they're so angry because they've already been through, hours worth of hardship to try to just get one thing done.
Yep. Yep, exactly. And also too, a lot of the people in working in these different systems are not friendly. They're not
No.
professionally trained social workers. They are grumpy workers who treat you like shit, to be honest.
Yes,
Not
absolutely.
all of them, but a lot of them from what I've seen, like they're grumpy too.
A lot of them, and they can't understand why you're frustrated, and then they're just frustrated. Like, I don't know, what happened to them before they got to work in the morning, but I certainly know, like, now being in someone else's shoes, what it may have taken them to just to get there, and so when motor vehicles, not picking on them, but they're famous for, like, you get there and they're so angry and you're like, it took me 6 hours to get here. I'm sorry I don't have my one sheet of paper, but please don't send me away because
Right.
is there any other option? And it doesn't seem like there is any other option. But I think, again, if we've had those moments where, we've all had a bad day before we've come to class or work and how we feel, and that was probably minor to something our clients go through. And I think it really just made me, think. And I know that day that I did the simulation, there were people from like attorneys to police officers to social workers, psychologists. I mean, there was just a plethora of people in all different clinical fields, and it was huge to see, like, oh wow, like I don't think about that. They even had a judge and like probation there, and even probation was like, wow, we don't think about how many people are on probation that have to come here weekly and what it takes for them to get here. And if they missed probation, it wasn't because they were trying to be defiant, it was because they didn't have transportation or gas or money.
Right. And part of the probation for some people is holding a job. Your
Yes.
job is not going to allow you to take a whole day off just to
No.
go to a meeting. And
Right.
yeah, it seems, yeah, I
It
mean,
seems
God,
like it's a setup almost, like, how
right.
can you expect someone to try to get back into the world, but in trying to get back into the world, they have all these hardships they have to overcome.
Yep.
Um, it was just really eye-opening, and I think, like, anyone getting into the field, one, it may be an opportunity for you to realize, sometimes we don't realize as social workers where there's opportunity for us, and just sitting in something like that, you realize, like, wow, like police officers, I think what we're going to find is that they need a social worker on staff because they're not trained to deal with mental health. And we do have, mental health on the rise and addiction on the rise, and the what it looks like when someone who's in a mental health crisis, but they're also struggling with addiction. And how do you help them when maybe they are doing something wrong, but maybe it's just a crisis, a mental health crisis, where they need someone to just help speak with them and show them empathy. And just, I think that we're going to find that there's opportunities there, and I think we're going to see the field of social work continue to just grow, and more. I think we're going to see a need for social workers and someone in the social work field, whether it's micro or macro opportunities for us. And I think a lot of them, you can go a very long way with your social work degree without, like I said, having that licensing piece. The licensing piece for a lot of it could just be a personal goal and not necessarily a professional need.
Right. Right. Yes. Very well said.
Thank you.
Um, let's talk a little bit about the organization CHEP. This is CHEP. What do you guys do? And, what kind of services do you offer to people like us, to the professional community?
Absolutely. So CHEP is awesome in that we do a lot of things. We abbreviate it as CHEP because it's long, but CHEP actually stands for Communities Helping and Empowering Patriots, People, and Professionals. So if you go onto our website, it's www.chepinc.org. we offer continuing education for all types of professionals. So, for social workers specifically, if you go under the education tab, there's lots of opportunities to get like an hour lunch and learn, which is a virtual setting where you can log in and just get an hour of some accredited education virtually. And the topics are awesome. There's different topics every month. And then we also have our addictions conference, which is one of our major conferences. And again, it we speak to anyone from social works to psychologists to peer support staff, just really across the board, all things social work, where we can offer continuing education credits and just get a lot of good education for those that are either entry level in the field all the way to someone like myself who's been in the field for over 15 years.
Awesome. I love it. And CHEP has been generous. If you use the code RISE, you will get 10% off all of these trainings and courses and lunch and learns and the conference as well.
Yes, I hope you guys come. It's great. You can do it virtually, which I think is awesome because, again, if you're in the field, and especially if you're in the entry part of the field, it's really hard to get a day off.
Yep.
And when you have a day off, you want to use it for self care and not training, right?
Yep.
But both are important, training and self care. So I think if you have an opportunity to do those lunch and learns, or just even if you can just do some part of the addictions conference, I think it's huge. And I think you guys will love the topics and the speakers.
Yes, yes, definitely. And here's a little tip for you that I didn't know a lot is if you ask your supervisor to pay for these trainings, they may actually pay for the trainings. Make sure they use the code RISE because we, don't want to jip them off.
The
But
discount. Absolutely, but that's a great point because a lot of times, again, we think like, oh, like even myself, right? Because I'm not licensed, I would think like, oh, maybe my staff won't, my nonprofit or my small business or my entity won't pay. But a lot of times they have, if they're getting any type of grant funding or if they're getting any type of funding, a lot of times they have to show continuing education and they'd have to show that whether you were licensed or not. So it's great to have it on your portfolio. And as you all are building your resumes, it's great to show that you're continuing to learn and grow within the field.
yes, yes, for sure. And just a little tip to be prepared. Come prepared with how this workshop that you want to register and you want them to pay for it. How does this workshop apply to your current position? That will make it very easy for your supervisor to say yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, well, thank you so much, Jennifer. It has been a pleasure. Where can we learn more about the types of events that CHEP's having? Well, you mentioned the website. The website's in the show notes.
So the website, again, it's www.chepinc.org. We're also on Facebook. We are on YouTube. We are on Instagram. We're really trying to build up our social presence and just all the things. But you can find us at any of the Instagram, Facebook, or our website. And then you can also always reach out to anyone on the team. There's our phone numbers on there or emails. We'd love to talk to any of you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's been a pleasure. And listener, thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate your time and your energy. And until next week, take care. Thank you for listening to the Social Workers Rise podcast. I want to give one final shout out to one of our sponsors, Social Work Wealth Con 2024. Thank you so much for your support of this podcast. Check out this conference in October with the link in the show notes.